If you came in a little bit late, there's a dog down here. Chugach is actually calmer and better than he was before. We won't say his name too many times. You might perk up those ears. But do you agree that Chugach is getting better? Yeah, you didn't see him yesterday. I'm telling you. Whew. He found out the difference between a horse and a dog. Horses are bigger. Before Christmas, I went out to ski for a while, and it was just going to be a short little time, so we put Chugach in his crate, dog crate. My roommate's family was in town. It was Christmas, that we had a tree. They brought 1,000 presents, all just beautifully wrapped, put them under the tree. I mean, the house was festive. I'm sure yours looked just the same kind of thing. So I get back from skiing, 4 or 5 hours, whatever it is, and I'm starting to unlock the door, and Chugach is on the other side of the door, not in his crate. Yeah, was what I felt. If you know this dog at all, he has some annoying habits, like squeaking and snuffling, I think was Daniel's word when he was trying to play piano once, was snuffling. He gooses you a lot. That's happened to Trisha a bunch. He chews on your hands and your shoes. But the most annoying thing of all is that he just chews all the time. Anytime he gets nervous, he just chews stuff. One time I came home and he had chewed 2 pillows, 1 tent, 1 hammock, 1 mattress, a whole bunch of shoes, just the insides. He doesn't chew the outsides, so you can still wear them, which is nice. He chewed my rowing machine. He chewed my tomato plants. This is just how he is. And so I get back from skiing. He's on the other side of the door, and I thought Christmas was ruined. I was terrified that he had chewed everything, and we were about to bring him back to the pound. I mean, in that time, I was just, he's gonna go back. But God is good. He didn't tear up any presents. In fact, the only thing he ate, some of you know what he ate. He got into a tin, and he ate 2 pounds of sugar cookies. And he left his own little presents under other Christmas trees outside for a week, somehow with the sprinkles still on there. I don't know how that works, but it teaches you to eat sprinkles, too. So this week, we were digging in the garden, getting the garden up and going. And this is the series we're on, and we were getting our garden going. We're digging in there, and in fact, we discovered he did not eat all 2 pounds of sugar cookies. We were digging, and we found that he had buried a sugar cookie to save it for later. Now, I don't know what a sugar seed looks like. I've seen sugar plants down in Haiti, and you just chew on them. I don't know what a sugar seed looks like, but it's not a cookie. And it's not the little granular, and nothing grew from this sugar cookie. When we pulled it out, it was old, it was crusty, it was this empty, lifeless, it didn't look good anymore. It was just dead, just a dead cookie. And my dog isn't the only one that plants things like that. We all plant things in our lives that end up just sitting there and festering. We try to plant pride into our big heads, and we never grow out of that. We try to plant power into ourselves, and that only produces things that are kind of rotten. We plant judgment in ourselves, and that just poisons us and poisons all the folks around us. This series, How Does Your Garden Grow? The idea has been, what would happen if instead of planting all those dead and empty and crusty things like sugar cookies, what if we planted truth, real truth? What would happen if we dug around in our heart and placed a seed in there toward a better life, toward a life that could make a better world around us? The first week we talked about preparing for that kind of seed by being open to new things, even when that challenges us and challenges our faith and the things we hold dear. Last week we looked at how to send our roots out and ground ourselves in God's love. So you have an openness to growth, you have a foundation of compassion, and maybe you can become the person that you really want to become. Maybe you can live out a life that produces great fruit from that. Now, week 3. The question is, how do we tend that garden? Once things start coming up, not just our plant, but how do we tend this whole garden we call earth, this community of people living together in spiritual terms? What do we do in our relationships and in our just human community to keep moving towards something healthy and something fruitful? So in the scripture, you heard about a garden, a vineyard, and grapes. It's a weird story. So weird, in fact, we're going to come back to that. We're going to start not on grapes, we're going to start over here on wheat. As far as I know, the Bible tells us nothing about how to grow tomatoes. I haven't found anything in there about how to grow tomatoes. I haven't found anything in there about how to grow apple trees or lettuce. None of that stuff, the stuff I grow. But it is very clear about how you should grow fields of food like wheat and barley. And it might seem when you're reading along, if you're reading Leviticus, there's something probably wrong with you. But if you're just reading along in Leviticus and you start seeing these rules about how to farm wheat and barley, that seems misplaced, irrelevant, odd. What's it doing in the Bible, and why does it matter? But the Bible people saw fit to include some details about this stuff. How should farmers care for their fields? How should communities manage and even mandate rules for farmers so that that food ends up coming and helping the community? What's the overall society supposed to fit in there? So the Hebrews, one of the rules that they had, if your field had wild garlic in it, which is just something that grows. It grows in the south. I doubt we have any up here, but it's wild little guys. They smell like onions. If your field has wild garlic in it, you can't harvest your wheat until you go and pull all that wild garlic out. What's that about? Why would that be? It seems so weird. Well, we know now, scientists and agribusiness has figured out, wild garlic only grows in places where the soil is just isn't right. There's an imbalance in the soil. The chemicals just aren't working so right. And so, if you let your cows and your goats and your sheep wander through the field, chewing on the wild garlic, leaving their own little presence in the field, that restores balance to your field. Plant your wheat the next season. Your wheat comes up, no wild garlic. It's balanced. You don't have to use pesticides today or any of that stuff. And you have a better crop. Somehow, these Bible people had a big brain on them that noticed something, and then they put that in their version of the Scripture. This is more of a Jewish thing outside the Bible, but that was the kind of rule where you would wonder, what does that have to do with God? Well, it has to do with how God takes care of God's people. Another direct rule in the Bible, totally weird about growing wheat. Leviticus chapter 23. When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your fields, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. Which is weird. Why do they care about the edges of your field or what the harvesters drop? Anyone who took the Bible study on Ruth might know the rest of this verse. Leave it for the poor and the foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God. So these Bible people had not only big brains about how to farm, but big hearts about where the food is supposed to go. And let me explain how this comes about, this edges of the field thing. Has anyone here ever grown corn? A few people are like, yeah, well, I grew corn. It's easy to grow corn. If you try to grow a row of corn in your garden, let's say you have a 100-foot garden with 15 rows on it, and you plant one row of corn. It takes a lot of work because that row of corn, the bugs are going to come and get on it, and maybe you can go and put the mineral oil and rub that on the husks and keep your corn kind of safe, but you could never do that for a whole field of corn. If you have a big field of corn, this is what happens. All the stuff in the center is that sweet, yummy, good corn that we all love to eat, and you just roll butter on it and chew it. You always go in a circle, never side to side. That's the good corn. And the stuff on the outsides, they get bugs, they get diseases. It doesn't ruin it, but you're never going to buy the outside corn in Whole Foods. It's never going to make it there. You could feed it to the pigs, that's fine. You could eat it, but you just have to expect when you pull the husks off, maybe there's a little bug here, maybe there's some rotten side over here. The corn on the edges is just not the best corn out there. So these Hebrew people, they didn't have corn, but they had wheat, and they had barley, and they had fields like this, and they knew that the bugs start from the sides and start to come in. And they knew that some farmers out there, this would never happen in business in America, but some farmers would say, I'm going to squeeze every penny out of this farm I can get. Every penny, every last inch, pay the lowest wages I can, leave nothing left over. Every little part of this, super capitalism. We know businesses that work that way. Do they contribute to the overall society? Probably not. So Hebrews, they realized, we don't want our world to look like that. So they decided, let's allow the farmers to make a living on the good corn, but let's save the imperfect wheat and corn for the people who are hungry and starving so that the farmers aren't making a living, not a killing. Hence we get a rule like when you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges. Leave it for the poor and the foreigners among you. Now, who went to the fundraiser last night? Food pantry fundraiser? Yeah, a lot of us. It went really well. And maybe you're the first to think, that's not right to just give the poor people the leftovers and the corn with the bugs in it, which is true. Leftovers is probably not the first thing we want to give to people in need. But imagine how this whole conversation started between society and the farmers and all the businesses. You work through the cultural and political kind of compromise that led to this law. Here's my sanctified imagination of this. Mr. Farmer, these people, they need help. Mr. Farmer says, well, those people should get a job. Well, they want to get a job, but you won't hire them. I won't hire them because they're lazy. What makes them lazy? Because they won't get a job. Why won't they get a job? Because they're lazy. Why are they lazy? Because they won't get a job. Well, okay, let's raise your taxes instead. No. How about a compromise? I'll give you the edges of my field. I can't make much money on that anyway, okay? Okay, deal. It's in the Bible. Just to guess about how that went, but however it did happen, these rules developed in some way. And the rule was to save part of your wheat for your neighbors in need, and a society could feed the people around them. And that's a better way to live when hungry people are fed. And feeding hungry people literally for them meant a wheat field. I don't own a wheat field. Anyone else wheat fields? Any wheat fields in Nederland? Haven't seen any lately. So maybe our job is to follow the principle that sits behind the rule. Maybe we should do things in our life that makes allowances for the most vulnerable people around us. We should construct society, construct community, construct our town in ways that help people in need. And maybe we should make sure, even in our businesses, whatever those businesses are, we should remember who we impact, who we hurt, and who we can help. For all the weird stories in the Bible about farming or whatever, that's often the point, is that they figured out a way to help vulnerable people in their world, and we are called to do the same in our context, as different as it might be. So, according to the people who founded this whole idea, one, there's a reason that we have a world, a creation. Two, love seems to be the best way to go in that world. Three, probably the world with love is pointing in a certain direction of becoming more loving or just or peaceful. Four, this is the real trick, maybe the reason for all those three is really the same thing. And five, let's call that God or spirit or the way of life, or whatever you want to call it. Those people seem to think it's not just a political issue helping the most vulnerable, it's a faith issue. If you think that God cares about the poor, that's what they wanted to do. If you think God cares about the immigrants and the foreigners, is what the Bible said, that's what they wanted to do. And if we want to follow God, that's what we're supposed to do. Which makes plenty of sense when it comes to the wheat story. But that story that you read on the grapes, that's a weird one. I mean, the idea of paying people the same wage if they work 1 hour or 10 hours is just ridiculous. If you think that's ridiculous, say amen. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Is Jesus just dumb here? Is he naive? Or once in a while, I hear some preachers once in a while say ridiculous things just to get us to think a little harder. And maybe I got that from Jesus. I don't know. But maybe Jesus is intentionally saying something ridiculous so that we can find the principle that sits behind what story he just said. So remember, in this story, the farmer goes out in the morning, hires a crew, and then he goes out halfway through the day. And by the way, he said, I think the crew was just standing around. That was your translation. They were standing around in the market. Halfway through the day, he goes and takes on a few more people into his work on his farm. End of the day, grabs a few more. And when it's time to get paid, they all get the same wage, which is ridiculous. But Jesus says that teaches us something about God and maybe about how we're supposed to interact with the world. So let's start with those workers. What would they have done if this grape farmer had not given them a job? Stood around and waited. The guys who got a job at the end of the day, what have they been doing all day? Standing around and waiting for a job. We use lots of words in our society to talk about these kind of people. I hear, my favorite one is hobo. These are hobos. This would be, Amy loves my funky translations of the Bible. I would put in the word hobo here. Because hobo, probably the best place where this word comes from is it's a hoe boy. It's a boy, a young man, who goes to different farms and hires out his hoe so he can work a farm. It's a migrant worker. That's what hobo means. It's someone who wants to work really bad, and the best work they can get is on a farm. They had it in Israel, they have it in California, they have it all over our country. We have people who just want a job, and the best they can do is to wait around. You've seen this scene if you've lived in a city, maybe in a rural area today. There's always a place, marketplace, or empty, maybe there was an old Taco Bell and it knocked down, so there's just an empty parking lot. And there's always a crowd of men in the morning, usually Latino guys, and they're just waiting for some gringo to drive up and say, I need 4 guys. 4 guys hop in the back of the truck. And he goes away and everyone else waits. Next one moves up. I need 6 guys to work on a house. 6 guys hop in the back. They've got their belts all ready to go. Everyone else just waits. No one else shows up. They don't get work. I have work. And I'm blessed in this job. One of the blessings of this job is that all the time, people come through that door, people who are experiencing homelessness. And they come to church, and they ask for a lot of things. Some ask for, where can I sleep? And I point them to the appropriate campsites. I might give them a flyer about where to get help. Some of them ask for food or socks. We've got plenty of socks. We've got some food in the bag. We can help with that. Some of them want just a place to rest. They want a bathroom. They want a place to charge their cell phones. We do that. That's easy. We can do that all day long. But you know what a lot of the people who walk through the door ask for? They say, I love this place. I'm trying to start my life over, and this just looks like a great place to do it. Is there anywhere I could get a job? That's the common thing that homeless people ask me. Pastor, is there anywhere I can find a job? And my answer most of the time is, no. No, there's not. Maybe in the summer, someone could, you could cut some firewood, or maybe B&F will give you a job, but they walk over there and they don't have an ID, or they're carrying a backpack, and no one's going to hire you if you're carrying a backpack and you've been sleeping in the woods. So they come back, Pastor, is there anywhere I can get work? No. The blessing in that is not the no. The blessing in that is that so many people come here to a church, to a place that is dedicated to making the world a better place. They come here to a place dedicated to building people's lives stronger. And it's almost like, I don't believe that this is the exact math going on in people's head, but it's almost like when people are in need, they come to a place that is founded on the idea that God pays attention to people in need. It's almost like for people who want their life to grow, not just people looking for jobs, but people everywhere, they come to a place where we want other people to grow. This is the place where change can happen in our own hearts, but also for the world. And we know this especially, that change can happen through this place, especially on a week like this in Baltimore with all the craziest things that are going on there. Some people are desperate for change. We know they are desperate, that they don't know what else to do but to break down the garden that has broken them. And we see it on TV, and it frustrates us. I mean, it's such a counterproductive response. And we say, why can't they be more like me and fight justice from comfortable seats and things like that? Why can't they send in $10 to an organization to fight justice? What we don't see on the news, and many of you know you don't see this on the news, is all the work in the background. All the churches in Baltimore and across the country, all the organizations everywhere that use protests, nonviolent ones, that use politics through their faith, trying to provide jobs, trying to provide housing, trying to provide addiction recovery, education, trying to turn all the justified anger into passionate responsibility. Trying to take people on the edges of society and give them a chance to grow. That is going on because God cares about the poor and the foreigners and the hobos and the transients and the young black men who feel hopeless in all these cities and the young girls who feel commodified growing up and the old people forgotten in nursing homes and everyone victimized by disaster and greed. The work of justice in all those places is going on because God cares most about the vulnerable. And you are called to tend this garden of vulnerable people with justice, peace, and compassion. You are called to a harvest of hope for those who suffer needlessly. Now, the thing about bread and juice, they were planted. They weren't just planted, they were planted by somebody. Somebody planted those seeds, and they were tended by somebody, and they were harvested by somebody, and they were cooked and made by somebody. And if we can take the combines and the machinery out of our vision of what a farm is today, think back to the disciples who sat with Jesus. Some of you just think back to your parents or your grandparents and how they worked a farm, not with those big machines. They worked a farm. And when they held up a loaf of bread or a cup of juice, they knew that food is directly connected to people. It's connected to people. And when Jesus held up his loaf of bread on the night when he was spending time with his very best friends, he took a loaf of bread. Maybe they knew who had made this loaf of bread, and he broke it. And he said, this is my body broken for you. But this is also my body broken for the people who have been broken by the economy and by society. This is my body broken for people who need wholeness. Every time you eat of it, remember them, because wherever they are, I am also. And he took the cup. Maybe he knew exactly which vineyard this came from. Most of his disciples were poor boys, already victims of a world stacked against them. Just teenagers. We know that one of them was a zealot, a revolutionary. Another one carried a sword, trying to break the system. And the critics said, oh, those young kids, they're dangerous because they're breaking down things. And Jesus talked about destroying a temple. This is a rowdy bunch of people. Other critics completely missed Jesus' point of revolutionizing the world with peace. Jesus lifted this cup, and he said, I am pouring my life out for you. I am pouring my life out for the world. We are called to pour our lives out for those in need. Every time you drink of a cup like this, remember them, because where the vulnerable are, I am also. Anytime you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, it brings you closer to God. Not in some magic, supernatural ways, but it connects you to the people who are responsible for bringing it to you. And may it draw you to respond to those people in solidarity and in vigilance. They will come from east and west and north and south. They will come from poor and rich. They will come from black and white and brown and yellow, and come from all over the world to sit at this table of unified diversity. Friends, these are the gifts of God for the people of God. It is our tradition to have two little lines up here. You can come take a happy chunk of bread, dip it into the juice, and listen to some great music as you reflect on your place in God's great drama. I'd invite the communion servers to come on forward.